Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Just give a few seconds and let folks join in. My name is Lakita Shelton, and I serve as the Senior Director of Professional Development here at NABIB. And I am thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar. We're fortunate to have with us today Kevin Trokey and Wendy Kniep. That is so hilarious. I still butchered it. Two highly respected leaders who have dedicated their careers to helping professionals elevate their sales performance. Their expertise in building strategies, refining processes, and driving measurable results has transformed the way countless businesses approach growth. It's an honor to have them with us today, and I know you'll find insight in both practical and powerful. With that, let's get started. Take it away, Kevin.
All right. Thank you, Lakita. I appreciate that introduction and the opportunity to be here with everybody today. And just to expand a little bit on who we are, for those that aren't familiar, Q4intelligence, we are a consulting firm. We work exclusively in the benefits industry, and we primarily help producers and agencies put more opportunities in the pipeline, close more of those deals, and then run more efficient businesses around the resulting clients. As just a little bit of a personal reference, before starting Q4i, I spent 17 years as a broker myself. I have been a member of NAHU, now NABIP, for 30 plus years, served countless roles. I'm currently the RVP in Region 6. And while our engagements address all operational and growth areas, the cornerstones of our practice are focused on prospecting and marketing and driving sales results. And one of the most common things we hear when we talk to agencies and producers is that, you know what, things go well when I'm in front of prospects. I'm just not getting in front of enough of them. And we all know how critically important our pipeline is. It is the closest thing you have to a crystal ball into your future success. Now, we always enjoy delivering this particular masterclass, but today it's a little bit special. It's a little more exciting because this is part of a formal launch of an exclusive offering that we're making available through NABIB. And I'll talk about it a little more later, but just at a high level, we're offering an 8-module sales training program, comes with 6 months of community coach and support, a copy of our book, countless resources that will help drive your growth. But again, we'll give you a flavor for what that's all about today. And then at the end, again, just remind you of that offering. As you can see, my partner, Wendy Kniep, is on with us today, and she's going to be monitoring chat. So if you guys have questions as we go along, drop them in the chat feature. If it's timely, she will interrupt me and we will address it in the moment. If not, we might hold those questions off to the end and just deal with them collectively. So with that, we'll get going. So one of our core philosophies at Q4i as we work with our member agencies is that selling is a transfer of confidence. When you think about it, you are always working to give prospects and even your existing clients confidence that by working with you, they're going to get better results than they don't. But of course, you can't give away what you don't have. You have to be sure that you know the sources of that sales confidence, that you build and maintain it at a high level. So what are those sources of sales confidence? Well, for client impact. When you're sitting in front of a prospect, you have to believe in your soul of your ability to make, which means that you and your team have to have access to the solutions necessary to make those impact, know how to use them, have a team that's capable of executing on them. The next area of sales confidence is your ability to tell a better story, your sales process. And our confidence grows when you know you don't show up sounding just like everybody else. Hey guys, the typical pitch is just that, it's typical. I mean, we're out there talking about, oh, we've been in business 37 years. We've got great relationships with the carriers. Look at all the free stuff we give away. What really sets us apart is our great service. In fact, we're going to provide such a high level of service. We're going to feel like an extension of your HR department. And I bet there's at least a couple of you out there cringing because that pitch sounds a little too familiar. And it's hard to be confident when you know you're telling the same story as everyone else. We feed into that stereotype that all brokers are the same. Instead of focusing on their story, our sales process, on our story, our sales process has to focus on their story, on the buyers. You have to remember, as proud as you are of the products you have to offer, your prospects don't care about the products you have to offer until they understand they have a problem that makes them necessary. And that's where the focus needs to come in. Having a sales process that by itself delivers value, that even if the buyer never does business with you, they will have learned something meaningful about themselves because of the conversations they had with you. And then the third part of sales confidence is a healthy pipeline. And I'm going to tell you, it's the most important one of all. And I don't want that to come across as any kind of a greedy statement, although there's absolutely nothing wrong with going out and making money. That's, what we're in business for. That's why you're in sales. But the reason that this is the most important of all is if you don't have a healthy pipeline, the other two areas of self-confidence, of sales confidence don't matter. It doesn't matter how much of an impact you can make on their business. It doesn't matter how valuable your sales conversation is if you don't have anybody to share with. And it's this foundation of sales confidence, a healthy pipeline, that we're going to be focused on today. Now, healthy pipeline. So what is it? Well, healthy pipeline varies by producer. There is no one single definition of healthy, but everybody has their own one definition. And there are certain numbers that you have to know, that you have to be tracking to determine whether or not your pipeline is healthy. But the common thread that goes through everybody's one definition is a healthy pipeline is one that if you maintain it, you know you're going to hit your new business goal. Right. So what are the numbers that we need to track? Well, first off, you have to make sure that you are aware of who your legitimate prospects are, who is actually in the pipeline. We talk about suspects and prospects in Q4i a lot. A suspect is somebody that you have identified that you believe you might want to do business with, but they're not aware of it yet. They don't become a prospect until they're aware of your interest in potentially doing business with them, and they agree to participate in that conversation in some way. So if you have your suspects and prospects lumped together, create two separate pipelines. Have a pipeline of suspects and make sure that you're nurturing them and moving them towards prospect status, but then have that prospect pipeline and make sure that we're focused on how we actively move them forward. Of course, as I said, this is all about will your pipeline allow you to hit your sales goal? So that's an important thing to start out with. It is shocking at how many agencies and producers don't bother setting annual sales goals. And even when they do, there's not much thought that goes into it. It's more of a round number grab. I'm going to grow by 10%. I'm going to grow by 100,000. And usually it's whatever it takes to make the sales manager be quiet and go away, if we're being honest. And when I ask the typical producer, how confident are you in your ability to hit that sales goal? It's usually not very high. So hopefully you've got pen and paper nearby or somewhere to take it. I want you to take that pen and paper and I want you to write down what your sales goal is over the next 12 months or the 12 months that you're in right now. What is that sales goal? And what is your confidence? So from 0 to 100%, how confident are you in that? All right, now flip the paper over or erase whatever. We're going to go through a real quick goal setting exercise. And we're not very imaginative in how we named this one. It's just called gold, silver, bronze. And so we're going to start off by identifying what is your gold sale of the year. So what would be that big sale of the year? And I want you to think of the amount of revenue that size client would generate. And I want you to think of this based on the largest client that you've ever written, the resources and team that you have to support the client, and the market in which you compete. Now, again, this is your sale of the year. It's that largest one that you're going to write over the next 12 months. So it's not going to be easy, but you know that if you got in front of 3 or 4 opportunities of this size, you believe in your ability to write one of them. So write that number down, annualized revenue for your goal. All right, now silver takes that same thinking and breaks it down to a quarterly basis. So what is the size account that you feel that if you got in front of 3 or 4 of them on a quarterly basis, you could write one of those? Now, I don't want to put numbers in your head, but for example, maybe your gold was a $75,000 account. Maybe your silvers are 30. But you would write 4 of them over the course of the year, an average of 1 a quarter. And then the bronze, same thinking, but on an every other month basis. So you're going to write 6 of these. Maybe that's a $10,000 account. But whatever your numbers are, all right, I'm going to do some quick math here. All right, so I want you to take your bronze, whatever that number is, multiply it by 6, because we're going to do 6 of those, and you'll come up with that total. I want you to take the silver, whatever that number was, multiply it by 4, and then add that bronze total, add that silver total to your gold number. Now, I'm going to guess that that number is for most of you significantly higher than whatever the first goal was that you wrote down. But when I also ask you to write down how confident are you to hit it, because if you look back and you say, yeah, if I got in front of 3 or 4 golds, I could write one. If I were getting in front of 3 or 4 silvers on a quarterly basis, I could write one of those. If I were getting in front of 3 or 4 bronze opportunities every couple months, I could write one every couple months. Because of taking the time to really think about how you're going to hit that goal, we become much more comfortable with a higher level goal. All right, so close ratios is the next number you need to know. And probably not enough of you are accurately tracking your close ratio. And there's a thing about salespeople. We have kind of this revisionist history to us too about our performance. We're way better in our minds than what we were in reality. If you go back over the last 12 months and you look at how many finalist presentations you gave, what percent of them actually said yes? And that's where we want to measure the close ratio, not from when they entered the pipeline, but when you get to that finalist presentation, when you're putting something in front of the buyer, giving them a chance to say, yes, I'm going to work with you, or no, I'm not. What percent are saying yes? And then backing up a little bit before you get to the close ratio or your conversion ratios. Now, of course, conversion ratios assume that you have a logical, sequential sales process in place. So Wendy and I, as we coach producers and agencies, we coach them on the Moore system. And it is a 3-phased approach. So there's phase 1, and going from phase 1 to phase 2 is one conversion ratio. Going from 2 to 3 is another. And then when you get to that third phase, that's the finalist presentation. So you need to know your conversion ratios. What percent of your opportunities are moving to the next phase? You have to be tracking your average revenue per opportunity. And guys, this is as important as any number you're going to track, because the average revenue per opportunity is going to determine how manageably you're going to be able to grow your book of business without plateauing prematurely. You have to be aware of your length of sales process. How long does it take you to move a prospect from first conversation to close? And I don't know where it came from, but so often in our industry, we say, oh, well, it takes 2 to 3 years to nurture and earn a new client. Guys, if it's taking you 2 to 3 years typically to move through the sales process, you have to work on your sales process, because it's not creating a sense of urgency. You should be closing opportunities in a matter of weeks or a couple months, not measured in years. And with these numbers, we can start to figure out exactly how many opportunities do we really need. Now, to this, there's a couple of our resources that we're going to make available. One of them is a producer annual plan, particularly timely this time of year, is hopefully you're already starting to think about 2026. So I'll give you my email address at the end, and that, and along with a couple other resources we're going to make available if you're interested in having them for your own. So let's look at really what that is, because most of us will underestimate the number of opportunities needed to hit a goal. So let's look at an example. And I'm going to use round numbers here, even though I made fun of them a little bit earlier. But it makes following the math a little bit easier. So let's say that your sales goal was that $100,000. And your average revenue per opportunity, let's assume it's a reasonable $10,000. Of course, simple math tells you you need to close 10 of those deals to hit your sales goal. And if your close ratio is 50%, then you need 20 finalist presentations to close those 10. If you also have a 3-step sales process and your conversion rate is 50% at each phase, now all of a sudden you have to have 80 first meetings to hit that sales goal. And the smaller any of these numbers are, the more opportunities you're going to need to create. Because you can't manage your pipeline if you don't know what healthy looks like, if you don't know the numbers. As the saying goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. And as a salesperson, there's nothing more important to be measuring than your pipeline and the variables that determine how healthy it is. Your ideal client. What we have to realize is, guys, not every opportunity is a good one. You have to believe that it is a privilege for anybody to have access to you and your team, to your ideas and your strategies and solutions. And we need to be protective of that. Now, how many of you have a client that you would like to fire? And I can't see everybody's faces, but if we were in person, I assume probably most of you would be raising your hands, and those that weren't either aren't paying attention or you're lying to yourself. And sometimes we need to fire clients because they're toxic. But there's a lot of times that clients just cannot afford the privilege of working with you. They're too small. One of the first things Wendy and I always do is a book of business analysis when we bring on a new agency or when we're working with a producer. And this was several years ago. We were doing a live sales training, and this young producer comes in and he was frustrated right out of the gate. And he was frustrated because he had $800,000 book. Oh, that wasn't his frustration. His frustration was he had been stuck at $800,000 for 4 years. He had plateaued, and no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't break through. Now, when we do the book of business analysis, this is something that's easy for you to do on your own. You just take all of your clients, you list them from the largest revenue down to the smallest, and then we do some segmentation. Now, this young producer happened to have 300 accounts. So we deviated a little bit, and we looked at his in 1/3, that largest 100, that middle 100, and the bottom 100. That bottom 100, out of $800,000 of revenue, the bottom 100 only generated $40,000 of revenue. So think about the math on that. He had 200 clients that generated 760 and 100 that only generated 40. And it hit him like a ton of bricks. He had too many small accounts that were holding him back. And you might think to yourself, well, that's an anomaly. That's not my book of business. Guys, it's not an anomaly. When we do this, we will usually look at the bottom 50, bottom 25, and in a typical book of business that hasn't been grown strategically, the bottom 50% will only generate 7% of revenue. The bottom 25% will only generate 2% of revenue. While at the top 5% tends to generate 30% of revenue, the 15% after that, another 35. So the top 20% generates anywhere from 65 to 70% of your total revenue. And not only are our books of business imbalanced, those small ones, a lot of them are so small that you're actually losing money. There is not enough revenue in there to be profitable. And think of where you are right now. You're already in the throes of fourth quarter. And I promise there's a lot of you who are busting your asses to hold on to clients that are not only costing you money, but they cost you time that could be spent pursuing clients that are going to look like that top 20%. So you have to know what that ideal client looks like. Describe what they look like demographically, by size, by location, maybe by industry, and psychographically. What do they believe about benefits? What kind of role do they want to have with you as an advisor? You want to define what that looks like and use that ideal client profile as a filter before you allow anyone the privilege of being in your pipeline. And if you're really serious about growing, you will use that as a filter to determine which clients you're actually going to keep. You want your pipeline to be so healthy that you'll walk away from people who either you don't enjoy or who are costing you money. Now, there's two numbers that I'm going to suggest you spend time figuring out what they are for you. And one is your minimum account size. And I would say your minimum account size, the largest client that you should be pursuing, is right at that threshold of whatever your average revenue per client is right now. Because if you go below that, you're moving backwards. But that's the minimum. What should you really be targeting? Well, when I talk about that top 20%, when you think if you had 100 clients, you have your top 5 are obviously the first 5. Your next 15 takes you down to client number 80. However much revenue that smallest client in your top 20% is generating, that should be your target level, that amount and higher. Their story. Oh, as salespeople, we like to talk. There's no doubt about it. And we love to go out and tell our story. We want to brag about how long we've been in business and the relationships that we have with the carriers and on and on and on. And it's important, it's relevant. I'm not going to deny that. But what's way more important than your story is taking time to learn their story. So think about the opportunities that are in your pipeline right now. What do you really know about them? And what do you know about their industry? What are the trends? What are the current events? What are the regulatory issues they're likely struggling with simply because of the industry in which they compete? What do you know about the company themselves? And I'm not talking about just the simple stuff that's easy to learn online. But have you started to figure out what are their goals? What are their objectives? How do they define success? Who are their influencers? Wendy will spot this stat all the time that in a significant buying decision, there's somewhere between 7 and 8 influencers. Now, guys, there are no more significant decisions than you're asking your buyers to make. You need to figure out who's going to influence that decision, what is their role, and what questions do you need to answer to earn their confidence and support? What are the challenges? What is it that's holding them back? What are the problems that they may not even be aware of? And as I alluded to before, how will they work with you? Are they never going to allow you to be more than a vendor? Or are they going to allow you to be an advisor, to challenge them, to bring new ideas? Now, Wendy used to work on the sales team of a large technology company. And it was big solutions that they sold. And whenever they went to call an opportunity, they usually had to get on a plane and they had to go as a team. Now, the leadership team at this company, they had come over from Procter & Gamble, from P&G, and they brought with them a tool called an account strategy plan, which is really just a detailed review of the opportunity, what we know about them, why it's worth pursuing, why it's worth an investment of time. And Wendy and her sales team had to complete that account strategy plan on every opportunity and present it to leadership before they were allowed to go call on that prospect, because the investment was so significant. There was so much at risk. Now, I know most of you don't have to get on a plane when you go call on a prospect, but I also know that your opportunities are so rare, you should probably pretend as if they do. You should have your version of account strategy plan. What's the information that you're going to collect so that you go out and pursue the right opportunities, but you pursue them with the right strategy? We have to keep the pipeline moving. There is actually that's worse than an empty pipeline. And that is a pipeline that is full but stagnant. And the reason is because you look at that pipeline, you see opportunities, you see potential revenue, but if that pipeline is stagnant, if their opportunities aren't moving forward, that revenue never happens. You have a false sense of confidence. One of our favorite books, mine and Wendy's, is The Challenger Sale. And they talk about the challenger profile as one of 5 primary profiles. And one thing that the challengers do that the others don't is they control the sales conversation. And that is the key to keeping opportunities moving forward, establishing from the very beginning, what is the target? What is the standard that I have to hit that if and when I do, I could reasonably expect to walk away having you as a new client? And a challenger salesperson, if that standard as the buyer describes it, if it's not reasonable, if the salesperson's not capable of hitting it, and especially if they can't get the buyer to define it, they move on to the next opportunity. But when it is a reasonable standard, when they are capable of hitting it, and when it is well defined, they keep asking tough questions to move the opportunity forward. Now, a lot of times the buyer, it may be out there, but they can't define it. So we work with producers to suggest a reasonable standard, a reasonable target. I'm going to role play it for you here. So Wendy, I know you already work with a benefits advisor, and I'm going to be respectful of that relationship. I'm not going to suggest you break it. I'm not going to suggest you start one with us until and unless a couple things happen during our conversations with one another. First, it has to become clear to both of us that there's an opportunity for meaningful improvement to your overall HR and benefit program. And if we could assume for a moment that that opportunity exists, the other part of our standard is we have to earn your confidence. We have to earn your confidence of our ability to bring you solutions to address any needs that we've identified, explain to you how we've used those solutions to fix the same problem for other employers like you, and show you specifically how we're going to put those solutions in place to ensure you get better results. Is that reasonable? Okay, so we've defined a target. And any buyer that's legitimately giving you a chance is going to consider that to be reasonable. And now we have something to move them towards. Now, what's important to move them forward is a sales process. And just going out and asking for a chance to quote and bringing a capabilities presentation, I guess we can loosely call that a sales process, but it's not what the buyer needs. In Q4i, in the Goose community, the More system, the sales process, it's broken into 3 phases. So the first, we call it an executive briefing. And this is just about re-educating the buyer, helping them understand that there's 2 different decisions to make. One is about the insurance plan, one's about you as an advisor. and how it is that you work that ensures you bring better results. The next we call an assessment, an analysis, and it's really a discovery process. Think of all of the problems that you are able to solve beyond insurance. I mean, that's important. It's always going to be the cornerstone solution that you focus on, but you're bringing HR resources, you're bringing compliance, you're bringing communication strategies, you're bringing ben admin, and the list goes on and on and on. And every one of those areas is a problem. And when you show up with the capabilities presentation and throw everything on them, it's like a doctor describing, writing a prescription without diagnosing the patient. You have to take time to figure out what it is they really need, what's not healthy in their current situation before you recommend a solution. And then the last phase is to bring that improvement plan, which is aligning specific solutions to address those needs. When you have a well-defined sequential process, it's much easier to keep that prospect moving forward towards it. There's some other things that you sprinkle in along the way. Make them work to work with you. Give them homework, give them assignments, test their interest, get them involved in the process, vested, invested. And one of the things we recommend, that one of the tools we use ourselves with agencies is we ask, if we were sitting here 3 years from now, it had been successful, so successful we're going to celebrate, what are some of the things that we're going to be celebrating? They will open up and they will tell you what are their goals, what do they want to accomplish. And then when you ask them a follow-up, what's working and not working, they'll start telling you what's broken right now. But by going through that exercise, you are already having a different conversation than the rest of your competition. You have moved into a strategic advisor with them by having this kind of forward thinking, by making them work to work with you. Send an agenda out prior to meeting. I mean, in a lot of ways, this is just basic levels of respect. But I will tell you, it is so rare in our industry that by simply sending an email a couple days ahead of time saying, I'm excited to meet with you, here are the 3 main things that we're looking to discuss, you will stand out with your level of professionalism. But it also, by sending that agenda ahead of time, it ensures that both sides are prepared. And sometimes you have to use that. There might be something you want to talk about as part of that agenda that you're a little uneasy about. But once you send that email, once you send that agenda ahead of time, you're all in. So sometimes you use that to protect yourself from yourself. Meetings intent. Every meeting that you have with a buyer should have a defined purpose. If you stop at the beginning of the meeting and make sure that you and the buyer are agreeing, this is what today is about, this is what we're going to accomplish, and this is the only decision we're going to make today, then that allows you, it gives you something to come back to at the end of the meeting to get their commitment and keep the prospect moving forward. So I told you about our 3 phases, the executive briefing and analysis. So when we get to that analysis, our producers, they're telling that buyer, today is only about me asking you a lot of questions. It's about figuring out what's working and not working in a lot of areas that we know employers struggle with. And the only decision that we will make today is based on what we uncovered. Does it make sense for me and my team to sit down and build for you an improvement plan to show you the solutions we would recommend to address any needs that we identified? And by stopping at the beginning to prepare them for what the conversation is going to be about, you anchor them to something to come back and say yes to. And a summary email. Again, within 24 hours, 48 hours, follow up with that buyer and just a quick summary of the key pieces that you hit on during the conversation. You know, I know you can replay it moment by moment because it's that important to you, but it's not that important to the buyer as much as we would like it to be. I mean, studies will say that a buyer will forget 50 to 80% of what you told them by the very next day. Don't let them forget. Remind them with that summary email. And then here's the litmus test of whether or not your pipeline is stagnant or whether it is dynamic. There's 2 questions you should be able to ask about every opportunity that's in your pipeline. What will the next conversation be focused on, and when will it take place? And not only should you be able to answer it, so should the buyer. And even if they couldn't come up with that on their own, they should recognize the answers when they see them. Client referrals. So guys, not all pipelines are created equal. This is in the beginning, I told you when Wendy and I talked to producers and agencies, one of the things we hear is, things go well when I get in front of prospects, but I'm not getting in front of enough of them. And so our go-to question is, well, Tell us, how often are you going to your existing clients and asking for referrals and introductions? Usually we just kind of get a drop of the head, maybe a shake of the head, they close their eyes and knowingly, well, I should be doing that. But if I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not. And there are those that say they do, but when they do, they're not getting any results. The thing is, not all pipelines are creative. If I could print off your pipeline right now, print it off twice and hold one up and tell you that one of them was worth 5 to 7 times the revenue of the other one, you'd say, well, how is that? Well, if you fill your pipeline with referrals and introductions from clients and other centers of influence, that same opportunity that you're referred into is going to close at 5 to 7 times the rate as if you cold called your way in. You need to make client referrals, COI referrals and introductions a core part of your strategy. So let me role play for you the typical request for introductions or referrals when it is made. It'll go something like this. So, and I'm the producer, and Lakita's going to be my client. And Lakita, you don't have to play along. I'm just picking you up because I see your name on the screen. So Lakita, I'm already thinking about 2026, and I'm setting some pretty aggressive sales goals. But what I'm also realizing is I need to be much more strategic about how I grow my business. I don't want to go out and do business with just anybody who's willing to sign over a BOR. I want to build my book of business with more clients who look like the best clients that I already have. And Lakita, that's why I'm having this conversation with you. I would love to have a dozen more clients just like you. And because I know we tend to hang out with people who are like us, if you can think of anybody that would benefit from us doing for them what we've done for you, to my way, that would be a huge help. So outer role play that's going to be a fairly typical request. Steed is going to be very enthusiastic. She's going to say, absolutely, I would love to help you out. Can't think of anybody right now, but give me a little bit of time and I'll follow up with you. But we all know what's waiting for Lakita when she gets back to her office, her job. So she takes that Post-it note, sticks it out to the side. A couple weeks later, she receives the reminder, oh, I told Kevin I would get some names to him. 2 weeks becomes 2 months, and all of a sudden she's embarrassed that she didn't follow through on her promise. She pretends like it never happened. Meanwhile, I've been sitting here for 2 months waiting for opportunities to come in that never happen. Now, there's actually a scenario that could play out that would be worse. And that would be if Lakita got back to her office and she said, to heck with my work. And she went to work putting that list together for me. And within 24 hours, I had an email of 20 referrals, all expecting a call from me. And you're thinking, well, wasn't that kind of the point? How bad could that be? Well, the problem is every group on the list that Lakita gave me has 3 employees. I've lost control of my pipeline before I ever got started. I'm obligated to call opportunities I don't really want. Now let's dissect that request for introductions that I went through with Lakita. I asked her for 2 things. I asked her for a favor of giving me referrals, but I asked her to do the job. Now think about that first, asking for the favor. That's what keeps most of you from asking your existing clients for referrals and introductions. You're afraid that you're going to damage the relationship, that it's going to make you appear weak in some way. You might be afraid that you don't have the strength of the relationship that you thought, and you don't ask. Oh, if that's where you are, I'm going to recommend another one of mine and Wendy's favorite books. It's called Go Giver by Berg and Mann. And I won't go through details, but I will tell you, when you read that, you will understand that not only will it not damage strong relationship, when you ask for a favor, it will actually strengthen it. And Wendy and I, we were reminded of this recently. We were watching a conversation between Simon Sinek and Trevor Noah. And Simon Sinek pointed out that you don't earn trust by offering help. You earn trust by asking for it. And there's a lot of truth in that. And it's no different with the clients that you've done great things, that you've helped. They're eager to help. But what's not okay is to ask them to do the job. That's your job. So when you show up to ask for those referrals and introductions, you also need to show up with a specific list of who you want them to introduce you to. And here, so what you can see here, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I want you to in the next day or two, and I want you to go through your current client list. And I want you to identify everybody as either a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 client. This has nothing to do with the size of the group, how much revenue they generate. This is only about the strength of the relationship you have with them. So tier 1 are those strongest relationships. You love them, they love you. You know you've done a good job for them. You know they appreciate the job. You know they had an opportunity to say something positive on your behalf. They do so in a heartbeat. Tier 3 is just the opposite. They're the ones that there's something toxic in the relationship. And maybe it's because you messed up. But whenever you see that name pop up on your caller ID, you send them to voicemail. When you see an email pop up, you don't open it for a couple days. Those things need to be fixed, but we'll deal with that later. By default, if you look at a client name and they don't immediately go to tier 1 or to tier 3, by default right now, you put them in tier 2. And again, we can, if you have questions on how to deal with tier 2 and tier 3 opportunities, you can reach out to us later on and we'll help you with that. But this is about focusing on your tier 1 relationships, those strongest ones. So for each of those tier 1 clients, there's 2 lists that we want you to create. One is a list of everything that you've done that's brought value to that client. It could be some renewal, it could be a claim situation you helped with, it could be a solution you put in place. But if it brought value, it goes on the list. Now, eventually that list can grow into a stewardship report. And if you are not providing steward reports to your clients, at least your best clients, you are missing out on a very important retention tool. The other list is a little more difficult to put together, and that is, who do your clients know that you would like to be introduced to? Now, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to do some research, but look out on LinkedIn. Who else are they connected to? But also think about, who else did they buy from? Who are their best clients? Who's a friendly competitor of theirs? Who happens to work in the office building? You don't need to come up with 20 names for each of your tier 1 clients. Come up with 2 or 3. Tell them about your ideal client profile, what type of opportunity you were looking for that caused you to put them on the list. Chances are they'll be able to add to it because you started the list. But make it easy for them to do the favor. And I'll touch on this again later. If you're not using chat and AI in your prospecting, and this is a great way to go out and do it to identify where those connections are, creating prompts to go out and do some of this research for you is hugely valuable. All right, centers of influence. Another important growth tool, really as important as those client relationships. And a lot of you I know will claim to have centers of influence, but if we're being honest, way more often than not, it's much more of a social relationship than it is a business relationship. It's somebody you enjoy going out with for coffee or for lunch or for happy hour. Occasionally, you will throw an introduction one another's way. But you need to start thinking of centers of influence as a critical team member, one that has to be managed much more intentionally. Another one of the tools that we're with you, we call it a center of influence guidebook, center of influence developer. And whether or not you are just starting out as a producer or whether you've been doing it for 20 years, you will find value in this particular book. It starts off by challenging you, where do you look? It can be hard to identify potential centers of influence, but you have to start off with just a list of who you know that could potentially fit that role. Clients and prospects, for sure. Other local business owners. We all know CPAs and attorneys and bankers. Maybe it's boards that you sit on, or an industry or personal relationship. But you got to start off with just making this long laundry list of who you know. Now, of course, you have to filter it down. So what does a good COI look like? You have to know the criteria to determine who you are going to work with as a mutual center of influence. Are they considered best in class at what they do? Are they respected by their peers? Are they a leader in the community? Do they have access to your ideal clients? And just as important, do you have access to theirs? Are you going to be able to help them grow? Because these have to be mutually beneficial relationships. Now, if you already have established centers of influence, but they're not being as productive as you want, you would start about halfway through our guidebook. And there's an interview process that we encourage you to go through, to sit down with that potential center of influence and be honest about, here's the potential we have to help one another. Why does this relationship exist? How are we going to leverage it? You have to work to make it effective. You have to be willing to work to to know one another and to not just trade names back and forth, but to understand their value proposition, how it is they work, how they're different from other attorneys or bankers or CPAs. You have to earn one another's confidence that by making introductions, your credibility is not going to be jeopardized. But again, those introductions have to go both ways. And then you have to work to maximize the relationship. How often are you going to meet? What will be the agenda? What will be the purpose of those meetings? You'll have to have a plan for once one of you makes an introduction to the other, you got to keep one another in the loop. And I would always say on something like this, do something for them first. Again, COIs can be a lot of work, but when they're managed, they can be a great resource and a great way to help keep your pipeline filled and healthy. All right, cold prospecting. You can see we've changed it to warm. I know a lot of us want to say the cold calling is dead. And there's no doubt it's more difficult than ever. But if you're a new producer, you have little choice. But in today's world, there really is no reason for a truly cold outreach. Now, again, the prospecting, it starts off with knowing what that ideal client looks like. I've said before that it's a privilege to have access to you. You've got to be protected. We've got to go out and know what the demographic and psychographic profiles look like and use that as the filter. Guys, here is a great opportunity to leverage chat or whatever AI you prefer to use, create a prompt to go out and identify suspects that look like your ideal profile. And then there's outreach. In today's world, it is still prospecting is still about numbers, but it's much more about personalization than it is raw numbers now. You have to research and be able to personalize your outreach. You have to demonstrate in whatever way you're going to outreach that you understand them, you understand their challenges, you can empathize with them. In your outreach, you have to have a varied sequence. Maybe the first step of your sequence is reach out and introduce yourself and connect on LinkedIn. Or if you're already connected, just have a follow-up message. Maybe after that, you followed up with an email, and then maybe you make a call, and then a follow-up email. But the key, whatever your outreach is, you need to have a specific call to action. Don't leave it up to them to figure out what to do because they're going to choose nothing. You have to tell them specifically what you want them to do as a result. And you heard me say in there, have a phone call as part of your prospecting sequence. Wendy and I just finished a book called Sales EQ by Jeb Blunt. And in it, he used an example of a sales team that had 27 people on it. And it was a high-performing sales team, but there were two individuals on the team that performed way beyond everybody else. In fact, each of these two salespeople, their production was 3 times the average of everybody else. And it's not that the others were slackers. This was a company that had done a really good job of recruiting and vetting and interviewing and onboarding and coaching and training the salespeople. They were all good, but these two were just exceptional. And the only discernible difference was that they made phone calls a significant part of their outreach. And then there was another study that we came across. It said that when you include phone calls along with emails, your response rate will be 4.8 times that of those that are just relying completely on email. So pick up the phone and make the call. You need to track and optimize your outreach. Like marketing, prospect can a lot of times feel like you're taking all of your effort and throwing it in a black hole. There's an echo out there. You just have to go look for it. There is data that will tell the story, but only if you're seeking it out, only if you're listening. Using your CRM, which outreaches are working better, various analytical tools. But you have to remind yourself what prospecting is really about. A lot of times our temptation is to say, I'm going to measure my prospecting efforts based on the revenue I write. There's a whole sales process in there that determines that. Prospecting is about creating conversations. So you should be tracking metrics accordingly, monitor open rates, monitor reply rates, monitor the conversions. We will track the revenue that will come when you're evaluating the effectiveness of your sales process. We would probably all agree that selling is a difficult and scary game. Or that selling is a difficult and scary game, and that prospecting is the most difficult, scariest part of that difficult and scary game. But we make it way harder than it needs to be. And we can make it harder. So a new producer coming into our system, they will generate conversion and close ratios of 50, 75, and 50 right out of the gate. And if you don't have a sales process to follow, the ratios are going to be even lower. And when you think about a typical cold caller will set one appointment for every 100. So if you have a sales process, but you're not practicing it, let's say you have to have 15 new accounts and you don't practice your sales process, you're going to have lower conversion rates. It's going to take 81st meetings with the conversion rates of 50, 75, 50 to close 15 new accounts. And if you're relying on cold calling and you realize that one out of every 100 is going to generate an appointment, you have to make 8,000 calls to generate 81st meetings to close 15 deals. We can make it easier. To assume that you still need those 15 new accounts. Now, producers in our system that practice and role play and make the system their own, that 50, 75, 50 conversion and close ratio will go to 75, 90, 75. With those higher conversion and close ratios, now you only need 30 first meetings to close 15 deals. And if you were making client referrals and introductions, the core part of your prospecting strategy, and you identify 4 opportunities for each client and they're successful at introducing you to half, you only have to have 15 client meetings making those requests to generate the 31st meetings and the 15 new accounts. Now, I've gone back and forth talking about referrals and introductions, and language can be powerful. And a lot of times, maybe a referral feels a little too heavy. You feel like you're asking somebody to tell somebody else to do business with you. Ask for an introduction. We're all social beings. We all like to introduce good people to other good people. If that's an easier ask for you, if it feels less heavy, then don't ask for a referral. Just ask for an, that will still get the conversation going, which is all you're really looking to do. Handling objections. All right. Any of you ever receive an objection during the sales process? Of course we do. Objections are inevitable. But even though we know they're inevitable, when we hear one, we feel like we've been attacked. Your heart rate goes up, you start sweating, we can't think clearly. It's because you're not prepared. That fight or flight kicks in. And that fight or flight instinct doesn't work when you're selling. If you punch somebody in the nose or you turn and you run out of the room, that's not a good approach. But what we have to remind ourselves is objections usually don't mean I don't agree. They usually mean I don't yet understand. And honestly, most objections are just an auto response. I mean, think about if you're going on a car lot with every intention of buying a new car, you know which one you want, you know the price you're willing to pay. But as soon as that salesperson comes up, the first thing you say is, "Oh, no, thanks, I'm just browsing. I'm just looking." It's just an auto response. But not only are objections inevitable, they're predictable. You need to create a list of the objections you're hearing on a regular basis. You need to script out how you're going to respond to them the next time you hear them and practice those just like you practice your sales process. Because now when you hear an objection, you won't feel attacked. You'll recognize it for what it is, and that's an opportunity to educate the buyer further along the process. Time management, another thing that a lot of salespeople struggle with. You know, the biggest reason pipelines are empty is because we don't make filling them a priority. As a salesperson, you have 2 primary goals: keeping the business you have and getting the business that you don't, which means you have 2 types of work. You have sales work and you have service work. When I think of service work, there's a very clear visual that always comes to mind. And it's that insulation that comes in a can, that foam insulation. You spray it out and it just grows and it expands until it runs into a barrier. I think that's the way our service work is. You get to Monday morning, you release the service work, and it grows and it expands until it hits happy hour at 5 o'clock on Friday. You have to put up walls to contain that service work. And I know you tell me, "Oh, you have no idea how crazy busy I am." Guys, I know you're capable of doing this because I know for a fact the most productive week you have in your year is the week before you go on vacation, because there is a wall at the end of the week that you are not going to allow to be impeded. We need to bring that in, because in that week leading up to vacation, you're more disciplined, you're more focused, you're more efficient. You don't allow yourself to be distracted. You get way more work done in a shorter period of time because of that wall that's been put up. You need to build walls into every single week that protect your prospecting and your sales time. I know your renewal meetings are on your calendar. Your prospecting time needs to be as well. And when that time shows up, you have to make sure that you're as committed to it as if it was the renewal for your largest client. Most of us as salespeople, our definition of success is your net revenue growth, the new business that you're going to write over the course of a year. But to achieve that annual success, you have to break it down and focus on success on a weekly level. I would encourage you to take 10 minutes at the beginning of every week and say, what's one thing that I can do this week in 4 key areas that when I do it will ensure it was a successful and productive week? What's something you can do this week in terms of prospecting, existing clients, centers of influence, and your own professional development? And we're only talking 5 days at a time. So they're not going to be big over the top goals. Maybe it's to make enough phone calls to put a new opportunity in the pipeline. Maybe it's to share an article with a client or a center of influence. Maybe it's to block out time to practice your sales presentation or handling objectives. But if you'll block out the time on your calendar, if you will spend the time at the beginning of the week to plan for how you're going to fill that work, execute on that over the next 5 days and do that week after week, that big annual sales goal will be hit probably by August. As prospecting is a responsibility, and it's a responsibility for you, not only because it's part of your job. I want to reframe it just a little bit. Think about it. If you had a friend, if you had a loved one who was struggling with something in their personal life, and you had a way to help, a way to make it better, you would feel obligated and you wouldn't hesitate to reach out and share it with them. And it's not that different with your prospects. If you and your team have an ability to make an impact, if you have ideas and strategies and solutions to make others more successful when they have the privilege of working with you, I challenge you have a responsibility to get out there and make them aware of it. You have to come to grips with the reality that when you have that kind of impact to offer, your call isn't an interruption. It's an offer to share valuable business ideas, valuable insights, and to make those that you work with even stronger than they already are. All right, guys, I mentioned at the beginning that today is the launch of the new program that we're offering exclusively through NABIP. It will help you add prospects to your pipeline to predictably move those opportunities forward to hit your sales goals by closing at a significantly higher rate. This program is a 6-month membership. It includes an 8-module online sales training course with materials and templates and scripts and everything that you need to ensure your successful execution. During that 6 months, you'll be part of our online Goose community. What's Goose community? Well, it's a whole bunch of like-minded industry professionals on a similar journey to you. You'll be connected with them through online resources, through live virtual sessions. As part of this, you'll get a copy of our book, The Salesperson's Guide to Growing a Business. And through that, you'll have access to dozens more planning docs and scripts. With this engagement, you'll be supported by access to coaches, Wendy and me included, to peers with participation in our community-wide sessions. We do sessions a lot of times, a couple times a month, a lot like today, but really more balanced between the type of content we shared today and peer interaction, your interaction. And this entire 6-month engagement, it's available to NABIP members. It's a one-time payment of $545. There's a couple ways you can get there. You can go to nabip.org and just follow the path through the Online Learning Institute, or you can see here, nabiptraining.org will take you a little more directly there. All right, so again, we've offered you a couple resources. I want to first say it was a pleasure to share time with you today. I know what a crazy busy time it is, but I hope that you're leaving with actionable items. But don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Wendy and ask any questions that we might be leaving you with, or maybe that come to your mind after the session's over. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Again, the resources that are available, you can see my email there, kevin@q4intel.com. We've got the Center of Influence planning. We've got the producer annual plan. There's other resources. We can get you subscribed to our blog, which shares ideas like this on a regular basis. But just send me the quick email and let me know what you're interested in me sending back. I will share the contact information here one more time. And Wendy, I don't know if we have any questions in chat that we should stop and field, or I can see you've been clicking away. Maybe you've answered them already.
We've had one question. It was about recommend leaving a voicemail. And I did respond to that. And I said, yes, I do think that you should leave voicemails. And my suggestion was to script out your voicemail, make it straight to the point, let them know who you are, why you're calling, and then consider following up with an email as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you may not think about is it just personalizes you when they hear your voice.
Mhm.
you become a real person. And it might be just a subtle, small step forward. But absolutely, if you're going to pick up the phone, be prepared to speak to somebody live or leave that voicemail.
Yeah, and it feels a lot of time like you're just, putting information into a black hole, and what you're doing is you're just constantly putting your name and or potentially your face in front of them, and eventually, people will come around. Not everybody will, but people will. So I do recommend just keep going at it.
Yeah. And, just a reminder, prospecting, it's a one-on-one sport of marketing, and the goal is to develop trust and familiarity. And the more that you are talking about things that impact them, you can empathize, that you understand them and their challenges, the more personal you are in that, the trust and familiarity built.
Okay.
All
And
right,
that's
good. All right. Well, I don't know if we need to call Lakita back in to wrap it up, or.
Yes, here I am.
okay.
Amazing, 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 Kevin. Thank you for all of this great information that you've shared with us. And we appreciate you all for spending some time with us today. The recording will be available on the nabib.org webinars webpage. And also the information can be found on that Kevin has shared today can be found on nabibtraining.org. And I did share that link in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakita. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Ready?